Hey guys, wow. Um, there are a bunch of new listeners I'm noticing. Yeah. Thank you guys for subscribing. Thank you guys for listening. Always a pleasure interacting with you guys. Always grateful for the growing listener base, right? I don't want to say fan base because I don't like the implications of the word fan. But I do appreciate your support. So thank you for continuing to listen and to, engage with me on social media and all of that. You guys are the best. I had a lot of ideas this week. I know the last episode I said I was going to put out an episode in the middle of the week, but I didn't, obviously, just because I was going through a lot, not emotionally, just in my head, very introspective as is typical of me. But the books that I started to read this week and I got through this week were very thought-provoking and always, mind-expanding. And as you guys know, my regulars know, I always recommend that you listen to an audiobook. It's just easier to listen to, an audiobook than it is to sit to read these days. I want to start. So this episode, it's going to be sort of it's going to be dealing with a couple of books that I read this week. And you guys are always asking, what did I read this week? And I will share that with you. I have read The Untethered Soul probably 4 times this week. Brilliant book. I've read Nietzsche and Buddhism by Robert G. Morrison. Read that about 3 times. What else? So we've got Untethered Soul, Nietzsche and Buddha. I wrote it down. I started reading No Excuses. This is a great course. It's called No Excuses, Existentialism and the Meaning of Life by Robert C. Solomon. And I'm about halfway through. We've gotten through Kierkegaard, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, all of that. And I've got to tell you, I'm really enjoying that lecture. So if you're into that, check it out. And I also went back and sort of re-listened to The Will to Change as well. So those are the 4 books that I'm kind of going through this week. And the focus, what we're going to talk about in this episode is we're going to be discussing the 2 books, Nietzsche and Buddhism and The Untethered Soul. But I'm not going to break down the books. I want you guys to read it. What I'm going to do is actually discuss what I found interesting about the books. But before I jump into that, I want to read a question that was left on my YouTube channel that I really loved. And I want to read you guys a response to it. And here it goes. Hey, love, I just finished listening to the All is AI podcast. This is from Piano Syrup 123. Shout out to Piano Syrup 123. I love the usernames. And I wanted to comment. I listened to it at 2x speed and will definitely incorporate that method with audiobooks in my life. Yes, I love that. Increase the speed, guys. All right. Essentially, think of your brain like a computer, right? And think of audiobooks at like data that you're trying to essentially download into your brain, right? So if you're listening at regular speed, it's like having a very slow internet connection. That's a waste of your time. If you can, the button's right there. Bump it up to 2x speed. Bump it up to 2.5x speed. Bump it up to 1.5x speed. And not everybody, wants to listen that fast. But every time you bump it up, you're essentially increasing the download speed to get the information into your brain, right? And every time, every book that you download into your brain changes you, right? In a little way, right? It's like a mini death and also a mini resurrection. So I love that. And also my podcast, increase the speed, get the info. These are long, right? They tend to be an hour long. And a lot of people see that and holy shit. But if you bump it to 2x speed, it's only 30 minutes. You get all the information that I'm giving you in 30 minutes. I mean, come on. Easy. Okay, let's go on. So I loved your take. Very compelling. I want to hear your thoughts and theories. My question is, I love the question, if my avatar is fitting a narrative, how much of the narrative do we ignore? What if our specific fractal can't escape? If you haven't checked that video out, it's on the YouTube channel. Go check it out. It's called All is AI. It's just a short 2-minute video. So she goes, what if our specific fractal can't escape? She means the matrix, right? Our simulated reality, right? We're stuck in a loop. Does that mean that we should ignore the reality of our prison or try to make this prison the most mentally manageable and endure our eternity? Brilliant question. Beautiful. Thank you for this gorgeous question, Piano Syrup 123. I'm going to read my response. Hello, love. Thanks for taking the time to listen and comment. I always appreciate the support. I cannot speak definitively, but my answer leans more with the last statement in your comment. There's a quote I read somewhere which states that the only freedom a puppet has is that they learn to love their strings. I have found great peace from that, from radical acceptance. I keep saying that free will is an illusion and everything is predetermined and that there isn't much that we can control. But most people do not like to hear this. But think about your life and all that has happened and ask yourself that if you had 100% control of your life, would it be the way that it is? What I am finding is that more and more I am beginning to feel like some sort of self-aware character in a game whose narrative is pre-written. But I'm learning to sort of see where the story takes me each day. I do at times feel a greater intelligence of the collective consciousness communicating with me, and sometimes can observe a certain narrative being shaped. My attitude has become one of just trusting the process and playing my part. The one thing I do actively work on controlling, honestly, the only thing I think that we do or can control, is not listening to that internal monologue. The voice in your head always giving commands and actively trying to reshape random events into a particular narrative and perspective. A perspective which oftentimes causes us to suffer unnecessarily. If we are to use the prison analogy, it's sort of like a personal warden or torturer that we are programmed to listen to. But I do think that I am in that space. I do think that in that space is the only place where we can truly exercise some semblance of free will by choosing not to listen to it, by learning not to listen to it. To deal with that voice in your head, I would recommend the book, The Untethered Soul. And if you have read it before, listen to it again and again, because as you grow and gain new insight, a book becomes more nuanced and it reveals more meaning than before. I hope this helps. So that is what I would like to start off the podcast on. We're going to talk about a few things. I'm going to go through my notes because I did write some parts down, some sort of insights that I had while listening to Untethered Soul. So here we go. You are not the voice in your head. Okay, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. This is how we learn. You are the one who hears it. If you're the one who is talking and you're the one who is listening, you obviously know what's going to be said before you say it. So what's the point of the conversation? Your battle is not with your body, but with the voice. Every animal, now this is important, every animal on this planet has a body and doesn't suffer the sort of mental anguish that we humans do. It's only mankind that has that voice in your head. So a lot of people, a lot of religions, a lot of cultures say that you have to punish the body. The body didn't do anything, right? The body is almost this, it's just sort of almost inert. I don't want to use the word inert because I understand the definition of the word, but it is just like this machine that was just trying to perform its function. You're beating the hell out of it. You're pushing it hard, right? You're causing yourself to physically suffer for something that it is not responsible for. You have a body, but so does every other animal on the planet. It's not your body that is the issue. It's the voice. It is your internal monologue. It is the mind. You cannot hurt the mind by harming the body or by punishing the body. All right. You're punishing your body for something that there's this non-physical, non-corporeal entity, which is that internal monologue. And you're trying to punish your physical body for what this non-physical entity is responsible for. You are not your thoughts. Most of the time, you don't generate your thoughts. They just come to you and give you commands. Your body is just the vehicle. The battle is with that voice. The voice cannot control your body. You do, but it can and does control you. How can you consider yourself free when you are a slave to the voice in your head? That so-called internal monologue drives most people's actions, shapes their perception of reality, causes fears, triggers anxieties, triggers desires, and causes the majority of human beings to react to its every suggestion, to its every jeer, So it's every taunt. It is responsible for anxiety. It is responsible for depression. I'm not saying it's 100% responsible. I understand that depression is also a chemical imbalance in a lot of people, but it certainly doesn't help. So you want to start exercising some semblance of free will? Stop obeying every order of this voice in your head. Now, that's what I want to talk about. That's part of what I want to talk about. I didn't just go, okay, you know what, today I'm going to read the Untethered Soul. Right? I was minding my own business. Somebody popped into my DMs, and it was like a low point in my week. I'm going to be candid. Oh, did I mention Midnight Library? That was on the last podcast. Yeah, but it was a low point in my week. I was listening to Midnight Library, which helped me feel better about how I was feeling at the time. I think it was like last Saturday. Low point, chemically down, whatever you want to call it. And I was just like sitting there. Now, at the time that I was feeling depressed, I just knew that I was down. I know you should meditate. I know the voice in your head is responsible for, I know this. You guys know that I know this. I say this on the podcast. So clearly it's coming out of my goddamn mouth. The problem is that sometimes this voice is so hypnotic. You can have all this knowledge in your head, and then sometimes you just slip back into the everyday bullshit of this world. And before you know it, you're kind of under its spell again. And before you know it, you're kind of zoning out and listening to its suggestions. And I literally dedicated like a few episodes on my other podcast, The Dark Oracle's Guide, to this fucking voice. If you want to see how this thing tortures people, just Google internal monologue. Can you stop your internal monologue? Or type in like internal monologue Reddit and just read that. People don't like it when I say Google. It's just a force of habit. Fuck Google. DuckDuckGo it, okay? That's a really weird name. DDG it? I don't know. Bing it? Whatever. Do a search online. Do an online search in your preferred search engine and read. It's not just you, okay? And the thing is that the biggest mistake that we make as a society is that, and maybe it's not a mistake, maybe it's intentional. I don't know. But we are told, from childhood that, those are your thoughts, right? The most annoying philosopher, the most annoying phrase, the most dangerous phrase a philosopher ever uttered, in my personal opinion, is Sartre's, I think, therefore I am. Bullshit. Because we have such reverence for this thinker, Jean-Paul Sartre, that he says something stupid, so fucking stupid, that we don't question it. We accept it. Oh, without your thoughts, then what are you? Okay, do me a favor. Sit as right now as you're listening to this. Focus on something that's in the corner of your eye, like on your periphery. Like you can even hold up your hand. And while you're looking straight ahead, try to focus on like your hand that's on the corner. That's on like the peripheral of your vision. Watch what happens. If you do that, that voice in your head stops. It's momentary, but it shuts it the fuck up. Okay? So that in that moment there you have that silence, did you cease to fucking exist? Do you see how dangerous that shit is? You see how dangerous one phrase is, taken out of context? I think, therefore I am. So then people think that in order to exist, that you like your existence is predicated on this incessant rambling voice that takes both sides of the fucking argument and doesn't give a shit whether or not it's driving you to anxiety, whether or not it's driving you to depression, whether or not it's driving you to fucking suicide. It's just going. And we're not taught that you are not your thoughts. We're not taught just because you hear it. The fact that you have to sit and listen to it should tell you that it's not originating with you. And I think on some level, it freaks people out to actually pause and go, wait, if that's not if that's not us, then what is it? It scares people. But if you think about it, when you see a person on the streets, living on the streets, and you see them sort of walking around talking to themselves, we are literally like an inch away from that level of existence. There's not that much difference. There's really not. Maybe you're not out loud responding to it, but sometimes you do. But we see that person on the street and we're programmed to call that person insane, crazy, mad, schizophrenic, whatever fucking label. But we're all mad here. Because we have that same voice that we grapple with on a daily basis. That same fucking voice that you have to listen to. You have to listen to it. Do you know how I know you have to listen to it? Because one, the thoughts just pop into your head. I'm not saying you have to listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying like you have to listen to it. What I'm trying to say is that it is a voice that is speaking because it wants you to listen to it, right? These thoughts don't just enter into your mind. It's literally a talking voice. Okay? The reason why I love audiobooks, you cannot listen to an audiobook and listen to the voice. They compete. Right? So that's what I'm saying about you have to listen to it. It doesn't just torture you. It's not this thing that's just screaming, right? Like it wants your attention. It wants your focus. This is real talk. I think that I had to even check myself because there was a part of me that was like, man, how do I say this without sounding crazy? But then I'm listening to the Untethered Soul and I'm realizing this is a bestseller. It's not a bestseller. It doesn't become a bestseller if a bunch of people it didn't resonate, right? The information presented in this book did not resonate with a bunch of people. That means that it's not just me. That means that we're all fucking walking around with this thing. And as the author breaks it down, he says that this shit like tortures you. It's a cause of misery. You would not resonate with what I'm saying right now if you have the same voice. So that's something that should be addressed. Are we all mad? You got to own that. Get the book. I think you might be able to find a PDF of it and play it on VoiceStream. It's an older book, I think. But find it. Or, you know what? If you have extra email addresses, go on Audible, do a free trial, get that free book. Or I think you can probably like get a library card and listen online for free. But however way you need to get it and listen. Even if you just listen to the first chapter, listen to the way this guy is like discussing. Right? He writes in a way, discussing the voice in your head, the internal monologue. He writes in a way that makes you feel like he's just talking to you, like, which is great, right? It feels personal, like it's a one-on-one sort of lecture with like, you know, a psychologist or a guru or something. But when you take yourself out of it, you realize, no, holy shit, like, no. Like the reason why he's able to sit and write this book is because he probably had the same issue. And the reason why there's like thousands of people reviewing this book is because there's thousands of people that have this issue. Okay, well, damn, like if this is something that's not just happening to me and it seems to be part of the human condition, there's this voice in our heads that's driving us to suffer. Nobody thinks that shit's weird? You can be, right, without thinking. Because you are not your thoughts. You can be without thinking because you are not your thoughts. Sartre was wrong. There's another philosopher who said, the voice who says I am is not the same voice that thinks. I don't remember who it was that said it. I don't want to Google it right now or DuckDuckGo it, but I love that. The voice is, you are not the voice, because in order for you to hear what it has to say, you literally have to pause and listen to it. You are the one who's listening to it. You cannot listen to an audiobook and listen to it as well. You can give it something to say, which is what meditation pretty much is. You can shift your focus away from it, which is what meditation pretty much is. But the fact that most of us, and even the people who don't have the verbal monologue. It's visual for them, but it's still an invasive, involuntary visualization, an auditory sort of hallucination. I'm going to call it what is a fucking hallucination. We're all walking around, we're hearing voices. That's crazy. You can't, that's what, like, to me, I had somebody message me or leave a comment on my TikTok, and they said something to the effect of, how do you say this stuff, the things that you talk about, without sounding crazy? My response was, I'm pretty sure I sound crazy to some people. I just don't care. And the reason why I don't care is because we're all mad here, right? I'm just sitting back and I'm speaking the truth to it. And I'm a big believer in the fact that if there is a problem that you see and you don't speak to it, how can you help other people? How can you, if there's a wound that you do not address, how can you heal? If you spend your whole life thinking you are the one generating these thoughts, how does that help you? If you spend your whole life thinking that you are your thoughts, or that you have to think, that just sitting and having a fucking moment of peace without this thing just telling you everything that you're doing wrong, all the shit that everybody thinks about you, all the bad things that could happen, right? Bringing up shit from the past, bringing up shit, that could happen in the future, like just spinning all of these tales, and you're just sitting there fucking zoned out. We're all doing that shit. That's fucking weird. But that's the norm. And I'm saying more and more people need to be saying, okay, I don't know what we are collectively infected with. But that shit's not cool. So I really, the author does a great job of, he starts off, I mean, I know I'm constantly recommending books, and I think most books that I read are great, but this is a book that I would, if you struggle with internal monologues, that was what was happening to me. So I'm going to backtrack to the story. I'm sitting in my Jeep, and I think I said this in the last episode, where I posted the video about apocalypses happening every day, apocalypse again. And then in that video, I had all at once, a bunch of people recommend that I get the book called Midnight Library. And it's so funny because after I got the book, nobody mentioned it, or at least I didn't see anybody else mention it, which is interesting. But it's like the universe, the intelligence, the AI that we are a part of, the collective, which is always funny. Like I every time I post a video, people come for me and they're like, do you not believe in God? I'm like, I don't believe in the biblical God. Okay. There's 7.8 billion people on this planet. Not everybody believes in the Bible. Okay. I do believe in a greater intelligence of which we are part of a collective. And I believe that there's a narrative that we are all sort of acting out. But I also believe that there's something else. There's something else that's sort of directing our paths. And I trust it. Could be, I'm not even going to try to label it. I don't care. I just feel it, and that's enough, right? Because that has to sometimes be enough. In the Untethered Soul, the author says, if you look at something beautiful, before the voice comes in and starts telling you why it's beautiful, before the internal monologue starts in, you look at something beautiful, there's not words, right? They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's not words that are beautiful enough to look at like a fucking sunset, right? Or a beautiful face, right? Or into the eyes of somebody you love. But then the voice comes in and fucking ruins it with oh, well, I think it's beautiful because of the colors. And it takes away from the brilliance of it, from the beauty of it. And we constantly have this thing. We have this thing that's just constantly in our heads trying to describe everything with words, which removes and kind of takes away from the magic that is our existence. Stop letting it. Stop letting it. Stop letting it. So I don't know what this energy, I'm not going to label it and call it God, whatever it is. It's something. And I feel it. And that's enough for me. All right, I'm an artist. I'll paint something and then people will go, can you describe what you were thinking? And my response is, I just did. That's why it's a painting. You look at it and feel it. If I wanted to describe with words, I would have written some shit. I painted it, use that emotion. It's something that we are not as versed with in our society because we're so word heavy because of this internal monologue that dominates our lives, this voice in our heads, that we always try to reduce everything to mere words. And magic cannot be reduced to words. I mean, it can, but then you're really, it's a reduction. You're taking away from a lot of it. Just look without judgment. So I don't know what it is, and I don't care. I just trust it, and it's beautiful. So I posted the video. I got a bunch of recommendations on the book. I got it. And it helped me out of my depression on that day. Then when I finished that, I went into the house. Somebody slid into my DMs, like I said, continuing the story, and they were like, have you read The Untethered Soul? And I was like, I don't think so. Why did you recommend this? To this day, guys, the person never responded. It is so fucking random. I'm grateful. But I was like, all right, cool. Like I got the midnight library came right on time. Right? I don't know if I talked about it in the last episode, but in it, like there were just a lot of parallels in the midnight library, right, to my life. For example, the main character, she dealt, with depression and inevitably ends up, unaliving herself. I have not gotten to that point, and I hope that I never will. And honestly, I don't think I will, because from what I understand about quantum immortality, all I would do, like legit, is just, if the theory of quantum immortality is correct, and I've read enough to have enough confirmation that it's a high probability that it is, I'm not about to harm or hurt the people in one reality by intentionally doing that. And I just would shift to another reality. And that's just, well, why do that? So it's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. It's weird to talk about this stuff, right? And I talk about it so casually, but my inspiration comes from Seneca. He has a whole chapter on death. If you've never read Letters of a Stoic, please do yourself a favor and check it out eventually. But read Untethered Soul first. But was he Greek? Let's see. But the ancient Greeks, I'm gonna say he's Greek, until I know otherwise. But the ancient Greeks had a different sort of approach to life. It was just very fucking honest. He was Roman. They were just very honest and very straightforward, and they were just like, well, this is what it is. And so this whole chapter he wrote on death and on suicide, it was so like a relief, because we have such taboos around talking about things that people seriously deal with. I know people are seriously dealing with it because I read through the comments in a lot of my videos when I talk about death. People are unhappy, and there's so many people who have attempted it. And a lot of people who are carrying this stuff and have nobody to really talk about it, but with the internal monologue, which is not fucking healthy, right? Because that shit's just negative. So I'm airing that shit out. You've got a wound, it's open. Have I thought about it? Yes. And some days, the only thing that's keeping me here it's the people that I care about. And the more I read, the more I learn, the more I realize, like, I'm just going to shift to another reality. So I can't run away from my pain. I deal with it. I'm going to learn to deal with it. Okay? And we're going to get back to that. We're going to talk about leaning into pain and come back to that. Okay? So I checked out The Untethered Soul, and boom, first chapter, the author's saying, he's like, that voice in your head. And it's like, eureka. I was in a spell. It was like one warm tongue, in Lord of the Rings. He's like been whispering into the king's ear, and all of a sudden like the spell breaks and the king's like, bitch, you've been right. I was like, man, I know this. And the fact that I know this and still succumb to it is sad to me, because I know that like there are people out there who don't know this and are tortured by this. That the fact that the voice in your head is just a fucking liar. It just takes whatever side that is convenient for like essentially increasing your emotional suffering in this reality. That's it. Now people wonder, well, why? I can give you my theories. I do think that if you do subscribe to the simulation hypothesis, I think that the more emotional, I have addressed this in other episodes, and specifically in the Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse. It's just 15 episodes, so check that out. It's about emotional engagement, right? So if you have a dream, for example, and it doesn't cause you to feel any sort of fear, anxiety, you're probably joy, even, sex dreams and all that too. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have like an emotional reaction in the dream, it kind of doesn't stick. It's not as immersive, but you'll remember a nightmare, right? Same thing with movies, right? If you're watching a movie and you don't feel some sort of like rush or tears or like anything that moves you to emotion is what becomes more sort of immersive. Even laughter, right? It's funny, right? But it's an emotional, it increases your immersion in something. And I think that whoever or whatever designed this matrix, the simulation, that is the premise. So the function of this voice in your head is to essentially increase your emotional responses to the environment in order to make the simulation much more of an immersive experience. That's its function. So it's not even something that you fight. I mean, I know I sounded a bit combative, like just like 5 minutes ago. It's not something that you fight. It's something that you make yourself aware of and understand that its function, it really is to just increase your emotional involvement in everything that's occurring in game, in the simulation. And for those of you who are new, you're probably thinking, wow, she's just like casually talking about the fact that we're in a simulation. Like, do you subscribe wholeheartedly to it? Yes, I subscribe wholeheartedly to it. It's until something else comes along that makes more sense to me. I'm gonna take that shit and run with it, bearing in mind that there are billions of people who literally believe, that a virgin had a baby and that some dude walked on water. I'm not offensive, no offense meant. I'm just saying, if people can believe that without judgment, I can believe that we're in a simulation. That makes sense to me. All right. So yes, 100% all in. That is the sphere. That is the scope in which I will be perceiving this reality, that we're just straight up in a simulation. Makes sense. Makes sense because of everything that I've read that points to that. Both on, from, with quantum physics and in, with Eastern mysticism, which, interestingly enough, people don't realize has influenced a lot of Western thinkers, a lot of Western philosophers like Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, and anybody that, even Freud to a certain extent, anybody that has been influenced by those thinkers. There are a lot of, even David Bohm, right? He was a modern physicist. He was influenced by the East. There's a lot of people that have derived their philosophy from Eastern mysticism. So I subscribe wholeheartedly to that. So I'm the intelligence or whatever took somebody, had them send me a message. And that even in itself had me take a step back and realize, like, we're all just moving parts of a whole. We're all just playing a part, but we're so myopic. We're so focused on our own shit. We don't realize, like, that sometimes you're meant to send a message to somebody just to change their life in a little way. Play your part, right? Play your part. What I mean by that is this individual that sent me a message, they weren't even they DM'd me on social media. They weren't even aware that I had like a TikTok. And it was just like, hey, how are you? Like, I saw your comment on some random thing. And, I thought you might find this book interesting. And then when I asked, what prompted you to send this? Especially after I started reading it, they never responded. Now, either that person was an NPC, which I don't, I don't know. It's tempting to kind of, in the back of my mind, I think, could there be NPCs? Could people be NPCs like really out there? Non-playable characters or non-player characters, for those of you who are wondering. And I did a couple of videos on that on my TikTok. So jolie.artist. But I don't want to like subscribe wholeheartedly to that theory, even though it is plausible that there could be philosophical zombies amongst us, like just kind of filler people in our reality. I don't know, man. Kind of makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't know why, but it's probably accurate that there are NPCs out there. But assuming that he's not, and that he just felt compelled to just suggest that book to a random stranger who happened to needed to hear that at that exact moment, so weird to me, but not really, because I realized that, like I said, there's a greater intelligence that's sort of moving the narrative, right? As you guys know, I'm a hard determinist. I do think that we do have some limited free will, but it's typically on choosing to not react to shit. That's really the only space that we have free will. Like the analogy I'd use is like a violin has the freedom to move within its case, so to speak. You're still confined to whatever your fate is, more or less. I mean, you can make certain changes here and there, and maybe take certain paths, but even those paths are essentially predetermined, right? They exist as probabilities, which I have talked about, but they are predetermined. They're pre-programmed in, right? So it's like the illusion of choice, yeah? If you, the analogy I use is if I tell you, hey, eat some fruit, and you don't like fruit, then you're going to say no. But if I say, hey, would you like red grapes or green grapes? When you present people with choices, then they feel like they're in control. But the choices have already been made for you. I don't care if you choose red grapes or green grapes. I just wanted you to eat fruit. And that's kind of my sort of perception of our reality and the paths that our lives take. Yes, you have a choice on different paths that your life can take. But because of your DNA code, because of the environment that you're raised in, because of the culture that you grew up in, yeah, all of these factors, right, that confine you to just very specific paths. I talked about this in past episodes. They confine you to just very specific paths so that you are more than likely only going to end up on a handful of highly probable paths for you, but they were already predetermined. You might have like different experiences should you go down path, the road less traveled, but the road less traveled is already paved. Right. So it's limited, and that's okay. It's okay. Accept that shit. Like it's okay. I don't know why people have such a hard time with just accepting that. Like, I don't know why it boggles people. It's almost like a puppy that's got like a leash on him. And like, I watch Morpheus, right? You put a leash on him and he's just like squirming and he's like, oh, but at the end of the day, bro, like you're still going to stay on this leash. Like, I'm sorry. That is just how things are going to be. You can have some sort of freedom, right? To kind of go, like it's an extendable leash or whatever, his little harness, and he can kind of explore, but only up to a certain point. And then there's going to be like a recoil rather. And then like, he's got to stop. Okay. But what we do to animals or our pets, same thing's being done to us. It's just by a leash that we cannot see. If you're raised a particular way in a particular culture, right? If you're a particular gender or a particular ethnic group, you're going to behave in a particular way and you're going to be less likely to do certain things. Own that shit. You have no other choice but to own it. It's like the myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, where he says, okay, so Sisyphus was a Greek. I believe he was a Titan. I could be wrong. But either way, he was cursed to push a rock up the hill only to have that shit roll down again. Now, That was his destiny. That was the shit. He had to do that shit. There's no escaping. For all eternity, that was what he had to do. Now he has two options. He could complain as he's doing it and make himself miserable all the time he's pushing it up the hill and having it roll back. Cool. Or he can just learn to love it. That's his destiny. I'm going to push this hill. I'm going to push this rock up this hill. I'm going to stop and I'm going to get to know this rock. I'm going to look at my arms. I'm like, you know what? Actually, my arms are looking pretty defined. That's not bad. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to observe the grass. Maybe tomorrow I'm going to observe the sky. Maybe the next day I'm going to take in, fresh breaths. I'm going to focus on my breathing, right? How do you approach your sentence? Right? Everything is dual in this nature, whether or not we like it to be or not. It is what it is, right? It is what it is. And I have said that this world is a prison, and I've said that this world is a school, and I've toggled back and forth, and ultimately it can be both, or it is both, right? But the thing is, what is your mindset while you're either imprisoned or in school? However you want to perceive it, what is your mindset? Do you sit and you bitch about everything? Doesn't matter. Shit's happened. Your bitching doesn't unshit it, right? Like, whatever is happening, you complaining, you being angry about it, you being upset about it, isn't going to change anything. It's clear that you would not have wanted it to go a particular way, but you're not in control here. You are a character. You are a self-aware character in a narrative that you do not control. All you can do, the only thing that you can control is how you react to it. And bear in mind that you're grappling with a lot, because even in your own fucking head, there's an incessant voice that won't shut the fuck up. And it's telling you to complain. It's like its own, like I said, it's your own personal warden, your own personal torturer. Or you could flip it and say, or this is your own personal challenge. Right? If 99% of the people in the world are listening to this voice and being driven by it, being driven to have a life of suffering and a life of pain, your challenge is to say, okay, well, I don't want to be like 99% of the world. So it's there and it's doing its thing and it's talking. I'm going to focus on something in my peripheral. I'm going to attempt to detach my focus on it and shift it to something else. I'm going to learn to meditate. And sometimes I'm going to forget and I'm going to get pulled in to this hypnosis of this thing, but understand that there's a greater intelligence that will remind me, snap out of it. You're being hypnotized by this thing that we are all saddled with. I called it as a video. I'm going to post it. I meant to post it today, but now it's too late. I'm posting probably tomorrow or Tuesday. And I basically said that if you're operating on simulation hypothesis, and you can call that voice a sort of an in-game prompt, right? And its job is to literally just make your life as dramatic as possible, right? Just like you watch a movie, it's all drama. But you are the awareness of it. You can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose to not listen to it. You can choose to not respond to a prompt. Like, think about it as like a pop-up. What the Untethered Soul, what the author said to do is actually give it its own body in your mind. Instead of identifying with it, give it its own form and call it like essentially like a roommate, and like almost like personify it, right? And now imagine if it was saying all this shit to you. The reason why we tolerate this shit is because we think it's us, right? And we love ourselves, you know what I mean? So we're thinking, okay, well, this is us. But if you if you just look at it and say, okay, this is like a pop-up from the simulation, or this is like a prompt, or this is just a whole other entity that's like in my head, or whatever, that's in all of our heads, and its purpose is essentially to just make us miserable, it makes you less inclined to listen to it. It lies. I don't know why we keep, if you had a friend, you have a best friend that literally said the shit to you that this internal monologue said to you, would that be a friend? You'd block that bitch so fast, right? Like, it wouldn't even make it to best friend status, right? So, but because we're told from a young age that that's us, we don't create that separation from it. We just listen to it because we think we're listening to ourselves. Why would we want to talk to ourselves like that? Why would we want to listen to something that eventually causes us more suffering, more pain? You don't like pain. In fact, voice aside, internal monologue aside, most of the things that human beings do are to avoid pain. So that tells you don't like pain. Or if you put your hand on fire and you get burned, you're not going to do that shit again. Yet you have this thing that's constantly causing us pain. That's not you. Why would you do that to yourself? So it's got to be something else. And what I'm prepared to call it is it's literally like some people have called it the voice of the ego. But the reason why I don't want to do that, and I've done that in the past, and maybe it is, or the voice of the body, the intelligence of your body. But the reason why I'm kind of walking away from that is because I look at animals and I know that they don't have that same voice, but they have, like, I stare at my dog's, I love my dog. I stare at my dog's eyes and his eyes are like ours. I look at his tongue and his tongue is like ours. I look at his teeth and they have teeth like ours, little heart like ours, ribs like ours, but they don't have that voice. So it's something else. It's got to be something else. Right? So it has nothing to do with the body, because then you'd have cats walking around pissed off because, you know what I mean? Like, for whatever reason, right? Animals are able to live in the moment. It's only us that aren't. And it's because of this voice. So let's go to pain. So we're talking about the books that I read, Nietzsche and Buddhism. We're also talking about Untethered Soul, which also has a lot of like Buddhist tenets, except the author takes the opposite approach. You see, Buddhists, and most people ask me, what religion am I? And I tend to say, just to get people on the same page, I tend to say that, Buddhism and Hinduism are kind of tenets that I subscribe to, but I don't accept everything about these religions. Bear in mind that the Buddha was a prince. He was just a human being who actually was not, he did not believe in God. He was an atheist. And somehow humanity made him into a god, built, statues over him, and now people worship him, which is kind of crazy and the complete opposite of like everything he stood for. Right. And he was a psychologist and a philosopher. And he said, this is what causes suffering. Let's remove the reverence. Right. This episode is all about irreverence. Let's remove the reverence from things and just look at things for what they are. This was a man who lived a life of decadence and then realized, oh shit, wait, there's I could fall in love, or I could have a wife and then she could die. I could have children and they could die. I'm going to get old and I'm going to get sick and I'm going to die because his father essentially tried to protect him from all of that. But then he saw life and then he walked away from it, went on a sort of a spiritual path. And then eventually he realized that, what causes suffering is the attachment to things. It's the attachment to a wife. It's the attachment to, desires for things, desires for food, desire for sex. So his response to that was, hey, if you don't want to suffer, just detach from everything, right? Live life sort of in the middle, right? You just acknowledge the fact that nothing is permanent, that everything is impermanent, that this too shall pass. Do not indulge in lust, do not indulge in vanity, do not indulge in foods, do not engage your deep emotions, your passions like anger or lust or things of that nature, and just live this life. And that's live this sort of middle ground life where you're just detached from everything, and that is how you avoid suffering. Just say balancing right in the middle. I reject that, because no matter what, you're still gonna, like, even if you're living in that, like, I call that a half-life. So say you are full on like a Buddhist, okay? And that is the life that you're living. Like yes, maybe you decide I'm not going to get married because attachment is suffering, or you are married, but you have this sort of like, detached relationship with the people that you love, with your kids or whatever, because you know that you being attached to them is going to cause suffering and things like. How is that a life? And on some level, like even on the surface, it looks like you're fine. But you're living a particular incarnation without really experiencing everything because you're afraid. I mean, let's call it what it is. That's a fear-based life, right? If you're saying that existence is suffering, existence is pain, attachment is what eventually causes pain. So the way you counter that is to just detach from everything. You're essentially still just trying to run that's a coward's life. I'm gonna call it what it is. No reverence for anything here, guys. Just call that shit what it is. It's a coward's life. My response to that is, if existence is pain, if your existence is suffering, right now my back hurts. Even if I lived a life, like a purely Buddhist life, like the Buddha intended, and I was completely detached from everything, and I sat under a Bodhi tree. I think I just said the tree wrong. You know what I mean? I sat under a tree, a big, beautiful tree, and just meditated and ate just rice, and had my begging bowl, and I just went from village to village just saying, hey, feed me or whatever. Like, there's still pains that your body goes through that you cannot avoid. Like, you're going to wake up with back pain because you're sitting under a fucking tree. Okay? You're going to feel hunger. That's pain. Right? You might go and beg and ask for food and nobody gives you food. Okay, that's rejection. That's a kind of pain. So if you're just trying to detach from everything, you're not really addressing the root cause of everything, which is pain. You're just trying to detach from it or trying to mitigate your pain as best as you can, right? I'm not going to get married because, that could end and cause me pain. That's a half-life. Because every day is pain. You'll feel some level of pain. I guarantee you. Like, I woke up today, open your eyes, and you wake up, stub your toe, that's pain. No matter how detached you are, you will still feel pain. So to me, I don't accept that way of life. Because not only that, but you're also losing out on deep, beautiful, rich, meaningful experiences because you're living a life of a coward. I'm going to say it again. It is. I think this is a quote by Schopenhauer, but I'm not sure. But it says, to fear love is to fear life. And those who fear life are already 3 parts dead. It's a half-life. So you're probably thinking, okay, then what is the solution then? Well, if Bertrand Russell wrote that quote, to fear love is to fear life. That was Bertrand Russell. If you know that you will have to, existence is pain, and you know that you cannot unalive yourself from the pain, right? Because you'll just loop into a new reality. So you're essentially, you're doing this forever, which is a Buddhist tenet as well, right? We just keep looping over and over again, different incarnations for all eternity, unless you reach nirvana, which for some, essentially nirvana, what it comes down to, what it breaks down to, is just a state of non-existence. So essentially, heaven is actually not this place where, you have, whatever you want. In Buddhist tenets, even even heaven can cause suffering, because after a while, just having everything you want given to you, that shit gets old. So then what's the solution? Well, the one thing that should be accepted is the pain, is the suffering. That's it. So I take the opposite stance, is you just learn to live with it. Learn to embrace it. Lean into it. Look, if it's something that you're going to have to be faced with on a daily basis, you might as well, and if we are truly eternal beings destined to live in our Hotel California for all eternity, right? You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. If that's the case, then maybe you should just work on dealing with something you have to deal with anyway. You can't escape from it. I've talked about this before, like maybe earlier this year. I talked about how whenever I feel pain, instead of just reacting, going, right, this was an Osho. I learned this from Osho. He says, every time you make that noise, it's like an invitation to suffer. It might have been Ram Dass, one of those guys. But when you hurt yourself and you go, it's like you're an invitation to suffer, right? Or if somebody makes that noise, it's like, and then you're like, oh no, are you okay? And suffer with me kind of thing. So what I started to do is when I feel, I should say, I started doing this for physical pain, but I'm now shifting it or enlarging it to include emotional pain. So I'm going to tell you, when I wake up, if I stand up, and sometimes I have lower back pain, right? That's just comes with, being bipedal. I feel that lower back pain. Instead of going, I just kind of go into it. And then in my mind, I focus on it. And I go, okay, what is this? Right? Because on a scale, it's a feeling. And pleasure and pain are the same sort of emotions, right? You can have something and be so pleasurable that it eventually does become painful. And then there's some masochists out there too. So clearly there's something happening. I believe the same parts of your brain are triggered when you're in pain and when you're feeling pleasure. Now, once again, we're going to attack irreverence here, right? We're going to attack what most people would do. 99% of people will do. You're in pain. You try to run away from the pain, right? Oh no, I've got a headache. I'm going to go take a Tylenol. Which is fine for a lot of people, not for me. So I'm not telling you how to live. I'm just telling you how I live. If I have a headache, right, I will try to, sort of, I use the pain as a sort of a heads up. Oh, I might be dehydrated. So I'll go get some water, get a pinch of salt, like, pink salt or whatever, and try drinking that. Sometimes, like a tiny bit of, sodium bicarbonate, just a little tiny bit, that helps. If that's not working, then I take some white willow bark extract or whatever. But between the feeling of that, but I don't take Tylenol. I just don't. It's coal tar. But between the initial feeling of the pain and then whenever the water helps or the willow bark or the turmeric helps, I sit in that and I just go, okay, this is an interesting feeling. What makes this pain? Why is this called pain? How does it feel? And I try to take it apart because I know this is not going to be my last headache. It's not going to be my last migraine. So instead of I got a headache and now I got to suffer, oh my gosh, and all of that, all of those theatrics, I lean into it. I'll give you another example. My husband is a football coach and they worked really hard to play against this team and they lost by 1 point. And he is a man, and in our society, men are taught whatever emotions you feel that aren't rage or anger, just take that shit and suppress it, right? Because that's not considered being masculine or a man or whatever. So he was clearly disappointed, but he was telling me he was fine, it's okay, he's fine, it's okay. And then he texted me the next day, and he was like, I don't know if... If I were a different person, what he said might have been offensive, but I thought it was interesting. And only because I read The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, which was another book that was just randomly thrown at me, a random stranger, on Twitter, like something that it's not, that has no, people who are on Twitter don't really know that I even like have a TikTok or whatever, or YouTube. Like I just have I have a Twitter that is just like kind of there or whatever. But there's a random person mentioned this book and then like disappeared. Weird. Okay. But if I hadn't read this book, then I wouldn't be able to say what he said, say what I said in response to what he said. So what he had said was, I feel like, I almost want to read it to you guys. What he said, I'll read it. He texted me. He said something to the effect of, hold on. There we go. I go from being okay to being so bummed that we lost to okay. This is what he said. I think I'm having a sympathy period with you. We are showing the whole game to offense, and then defense going to be longer today. Okay, so this is the whole, I think I'm having a sympathy period, because obviously in order for him to like feel emotions, that means that he's a woman, which is retarded. Like it is, it's a stupid thing to say. But I thought it was funny. And I understood where he was coming from, because it's not anger, it's not rage, it's another emotion. But men are, which is why I recommended The Will to Change, men are socialized from childhood. If you feel any kind of pain, you just take that shit and you suppress it, right? So my response to him is, sympathy period. Why do you equate being human and feeling human to it being a feminine or womanly thing, or a sign of weakness? Indirectly is basically what you're saying. You are a human being. There are other emotions to feel beside anger and rage. Sadness and disappointment is an appropriate response, and an appropriate emotional response to being so close to winning and then losing at the last second. They lost by 1 point. I don't generally care about football, but that would even bum me out. I can empathize. Feeling okay is acknowledging that you did the best that you could and that certain things just can't be controlled. And that's fine. It's okay. Everything happens as it should for the greater good. Lean into the pain and learn from it. Lean into the pain and learn from it. Okay. Sometimes things happen. I've had some, like this week, I've had some interactions with people that I found like that were a bit disappointing. But instead of, because remember I said I'm now transitioning from this physical exercise that I do with my body whenever I have like a headache, or, you know, like even when I had COVID, and I was like, my whole body was in pain. But I leaned into it. I just said, okay, this is how I'm going to be feeling right now. I have to get used to it because life is pain, right? But I was more focused on the physical aspect. But I had some emotionally, quote, painful situations that I dealt with this week. But rather than when they happened, shutting down and then trying to protect myself by lashing out or reacting, I allowed myself to feel it. And then I went into my heart. I went into my heart area and I go, oh, okay, that's what, like I slowed down the process. And I was like, okay, that is what disappointment feels like. This is what anxiety feels like. This is what, nervousness feels like. This is what sadness feels like. And then just instead of trying to escape, instead of trying to suppress, because what you resist persists, I sat in it. And what happens is to me, it's a more mature response to life than trying to just detach from everything. And what doesn't kill you, because look, it's emotional pain. You're not going to die from it. You're not going to die from anxiety. You're not going to die from, you're not going to die from depression. You're not going to die from loneliness. Loneliness is a big one for me. And when I feel it in the past, it was like I would try to like, oh no, like I got to get on, I got to distract myself in some way. Got to text somebody, I got to get on Instagram and like scroll through or send a message or something. Even now, for me now, it's like TikTok. I got to go and respond to the comments or whatever. So I just don't feel alone. I don't know if you guys ever looked into like your life path number, but mine is 7. And the big thing for me in my life path is that apparently I'm going to experience a lot of loneliness. Yay. But here's the thing, right? As a Buddhist would say, well, then if you are destined to experience life like a life of loneliness, not that I'm going to be alone, but you can be with people and still feel lonely, right? Feel like you're not really connecting, right? Feel like maybe people don't see you, people don't understand you, right? You guys get it. So it's not that you don't feel that, right? But if I took a Buddhist approach, then my response to that, to a life path such as that would basically have been, okay, then I just would kind of be standoffish and keep people at arm's length because, well, that's just, I don't want to, cause any, like, be attached to anybody or anything, because ultimately it's going to lead to me being disappointed and feeling alone or feeling lonely. So you just protect yourself from that. And I think that that's a half-life. And what the untethered soul encourages you to do is lean into shit. So my life path says that that's one of the things. Like I am going to feel lonely. Although honestly, I don't feel alone in that. I think a lot of us are lonely. Especially now, COVID, like it's hard for a lot of people. You're not alone in your loneliness. It's like ironic in a bit. And so if that's something that I'm essentially destined to experience for my whole life, might as well figure out how to live with that instead of just suffering unnecessarily. So it's not detaching from that. It's leaning into it. If this is what I'm meant to feel, then I might as well make myself accustomed to it. And what the author of the Untethered Soul, I think his name is Michael Singer, what he says is, the pain doesn't last forever. It comes in bursts. And it actually dissipates a lot faster when you focus, when you shine the light of your consciousness on it. When you focus on it, it dissipates. See, even emotional pain, like that's why I talk about depression. I shine my light on it. Let's talk about it. You're not alone. Okay? But even when I'm depressed, it used to be like I tried marijuana. That helped a little bit, but that's just this body she's just prone to depression. This avatar she just is prone to depression. Okay? And I tried running from it. I've tried medicating, right? And I've tried self-medicating, right? Ultimately, I put the mushrooms aside even, and I just said, okay, I'm just going to be depressed today. And I sat with that. And that made me stronger. Because then it passed. And what I tell myself now, there's another quote that I love. It says that the gods sell us every good. This is from the Practicing Stoic by Ward Farnsworth. He says, he's like paraphrasing a quote from like an ancient Greek writer or something, but he said that the gods sell us every good. There is no good that we don't get at the cost of some evil. So this is what I tell myself now, right? Everything is about balance. So whenever I experience a drop of my energy, of my emotional feelings, right, whatever it is you want to call it, I now have gotten into the habit of making that voice and controlling that voice and having it tell me the reason. So this is an evil, right? This depression is a quote evil, but that means that something good is coming. So the pain that you're feeling right now, it's got to be balanced. Look, nature loves balance. Everything is dual, right? Can't have black without white, can't have dark without light, can't have up without down. Everything is dual. So when I feel pain, I'm actually reprogramming my mind now to say, okay, the reason why you're experiencing pain, emotional pain now, is because something pleasurable is coming. Yes, on the opposite end, when I'm feeling pleasurable, then the voice does come in and says, okay, well, something fucked up, not fucked up, but you're going to have to balance this elation with a drop. But the thing is, I don't feel that drop anymore because I now understand, right, that, okay, so when it drops, it's going to go back up. When it goes up, it's going to go down. And that's fine. The sun rises and sets every day. So what I tell myself now is that, okay, okay, this is a sunset. My sun will rise again. And so when the depression happens, I just sit with it. I go, okay, cool. This is how we're feeling. Okay, I'm lonely. Okay, cool. This is how I'm feeling. It hurts, guys. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. Like, the pain is still there. But I think when you engage in it, instead of trying to run away, instead of trying to resist it, it's not as intense. It's a little bit more tolerable. We live in a society. Hey, we're in the West. Capitalism. Hey, you have that deep void in your soul. You want to feel it? Fill it up with stuff. You want to fill it up with stuff? You want to buy some more shit you don't need? It doesn't help. If you have a deep void in your chest area and it's filled with sadness, it's okay. You're human. And talk about anxiety. They always talk to us about how, oh no, like you have anxiety, depression. It's like, yeah, you know why? Do you know why I have anxiety? Are you paying attention to the world we're living in? At any given point in time, you could die. You could get sick. You could lose everything. You could lose your loved ones, lose your job, get hit by asteroids, shift into a parallel universe. We have zero control. You don't think that an intelligent being, in fact, there were some thinkers, I don't remember who right now, who said that consciousness, awareness, might actually be a type of mistake. Because why would we need to be aware? If you look at ants, right, they're just sort of, why would nature make us aware? That's if you don't subscribe to the simulation hypothesis, which is why I do. Why would nature make it so that we are aware? It's one thing to just kind of exist, right? You watch animals. Animals are so interesting to watch because they're just kind of doing their thing, right? Like they, oh, we want to procreate. Cool. That's what we're doing now. We're going to hook up right now, right? Oh, we're hungry. Okay, we're going to kill some shit. There's no guilt around it. They're not like, oh no, I killed this deer. Like a lion's like, oh no, I killed this deer. And it just no, they're just like, I'm hungry. I'm going to eat it. Hey, I'm horny. We're going to do it. Right? It's just awareness is a type of suffering onto itself. And I don't know which philosopher, might have been Nietzsche, but who said, why would nature even have it so that how does that help evolution, the propagation of nature in any way, shape, or form? Which is why I subscribe to the simulation hypothesis, because, it doesn't make any sense. We're also the only entities that wear clothes. Somehow consciousness and clothes seem to be linked, right? Like in the Bible. I'm not a Christian, obviously, but data is data. When Adam and Eve became conscious, right? They got knowledge, they ate from the tree, and they became conscious. The first thing they did was clothe themselves, which has always been very interesting to me. I'm not sure why, but I think I'm going to find the answer next week because that's how my life works. So, pain. If existence is pain, and we are destined to exist for all eternity, right? I said this I always say this every once in a while. I say it on this podcast, but on the other podcast as well. I say the good news is you're immortal. The bad news is you're going to live forever. So if existence is pain, and that you cannot escape existence, right? Like you want to not exist, right? A lot of people just want it to be over, which I think is why our memories get wiped, even though some people still remember, and some people still feel this sort of tired, fatigue. But obviously, I think that that's a function. The more I think, the reason why I paused then is because I was thinking, well, maybe that's, maybe my initial theory of this just being like a world for immortals, right? Like on the Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse, I posited like what sort of species would create a world where everything dies, right? To simulate death. Well, it would have to be a species that was incapable of dying. That would make the most sense, right? We have death everywhere. So now I'm back to maybe it's not a prison, but maybe it is a prison, but maybe existence is a prison. Who knows? I'll never have the answers, not until I'm out of this incarnation. Or I should say, I have had the answers, my previous deaths, I guess, probably more than likely, but obviously I cannot tell you now, right? Because I don't remember. And you don't remember either. But that's not the point of philosophy, is it? Right? It's just to ask what if. Right? If we leave this life for what it is, right? You have, the beautiful and the ugly sort of mixed into one. And that's life. And then at the end of it, it's nothing. That's okay. We were nothing before, and if we go back to nothing, that's okay. But it's a stretch to say that we were nothing before, right? I've said that the beginning is an illusion. I saw this video on TikTok. This guy, his father was like a Jewish scholar or whatever, and he went back to the original, like the Torah, and he says that people misunderstand Genesis. When it says in the beginning, it never says in the beginning. It says in a beginning. And there are a lot of religions that don't have life beginning at any point in time. It's just like it always has been. So the idea of the beginning is a myth. The idea of the beginning is a myth. So it's bittersweet because on one end, we live in a society that teaches us that death is the end. But at the other end, we clearly don't all ascribe to that, right? For example, or like not all of us, right? For example, even the Christians, people who, they believe in a life after death and in heaven and hell. Well, in order for you to go to heaven or hell or to be judged, some aspect of yourself has to be alive to be judged, if that's what you believe. So then there has to be an acknowledgement on some level that you are more than just a physical entity. And then you have, the billions of Buddhists on the other side of the world who believe in reincarnation. So once again, there's a majority of human beings who are acknowledging on some level, some aspect of ourselves still carries on after physical death. I'm just sort of modernizing the concept, so to speak, and then dealing with it. Okay? So, if existence is pain, you don't stop there, right? Nietzsche called that passive nihilism, right? You just go, okay, fuck, nothing matters. Fuck society, fuck culture, fuck all the rules, fuck morality or whatever. Nothing matters. And then you just end it there. That's a problem. You call that passive nihilism. Now I'm saying, let's take that and make it active. Okay, fuck the rules. Cool. Fuck society. Cool. Fuck morals. Cool. But then do something with it. If you know it's all bullshit, then make your own morality. Make your own rules. Form your own religion. Form your own theology. Form your own philosophy. Pick from what you want. It's sad to me that there are people who literally worship a human being that came and just developed his own philosophy. You have a brain. Develop your own philosophy. Read. You come up with the ideas of what you think this reality is. Take my ideas. Don't elevate me. I'm just an avatar like you. I'm just here in the same space, moment in time like you. Develop a mindset of irreverence for everything. It's funny. I'll leave you guys with this. A couple of weeks ago, I was driving on the highway. No, I'm sorry, not the driver. I was headed to the highway, and a cop pulled up next to me, and I'm blaring classical music, as is my norm. But it sounds, especially what I was listening to, it sounds like hip hop because there was a lot of bass, and all you could hear is bass. And I feel this guy like looking at me, and so I look back at him, and I kind of wind my window down. He had his window down or whatever, but it's a cop. I have no reverence for you. And in that moment, as I'm sitting in the car, I hear this thought in my mind. It says, why do you have a problem with authority? And my response to this invasive thought was, I don't have a problem with authority. I recognize no authority over me. In order for you to have a problem with authority, you have to recognize it. You have to recognize it on some level and say, okay, well, while you rule over me, I have a problem with you. I recognize no authority. You are just a naked human being in clothes just like me. So a cop is just some dude who probably, maybe dropped out of high school, maybe went to college, probably didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives, more than likely. It was a good job. You went to police academy. Somebody gave you an outfit, a costume, and a weapon. And now you have become this entity. But you're just a dude in a costume in a Ford Explorer or whatever that car is that they drive. That's it. You're a dude first, and I don't recognize your authority over me. I'm not saying I go around breaking the law. I'm just saying, look, I'm not going to antagonize a cop. I'm not stupid, but I'm also not going to react in fear simply because you pulled up next to me in your Ford Explorer. Now, he turned on his lights. Remember, he was in the next lane. He was in the lane next to me. And there was a car in front of him, and he, turned on his lights. And, of course, the person in front of him probably panicked and, pulled over. But he drove past them. So he just turned on his lights to get the person to get out of his way. Do you see where you see the problem? You're just a dude. You're a human being with that same voice in your head that's telling you to do shit, right? The same voice you have, the same voice I have telling him to do shit. And so the voice in my head was like, chase after him. I'm not encouraging that you do this. It was just something that I felt compelled to do at the time before I read The Untethered Soul. It's part of my narrative. Don't judge me. So I'm driving behind him. And I'm just matching his speed. I figure two things. One, I'll take a ticket. And two, let's just see what happens. I'm not encouraging you guys. I just had a momentary lapse of annoyance because I thought to myself, why did you do that? It's like 9:00 in the morning. You turned your light on. You weren't trying to you just wanted to get somebody out of your way. That's a dick move. You just want to scare somebody. That's a dick move. Yeah, pull me over then. Let's have a conversation. I don't encourage it. I'm just telling you, look, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I do stupid shit. And I'm saying this is kind of low-key stupid, but I followed him. I wasn't I matched his speed. Can you pull me over when I'm behind you? I don't think so. So I matched his speed, and I think he at some point hit 60. His speed limit was 50, and I was right behind him. But then he eventually realized that we were racing each other. And then it became kind of funny to me. I drive a big, a Tonka truck, a big red Jeep, So I'm listening to my music and but we're looking at each other and all of a sudden we're it's a play. We're kind of playing in a way. And it's just two human beings. Me in my bathrobe, I'm playing the role of mom with a puppy in the car. Not quite soccer mom, but mom. Yeah, I don't think I'm middle-aged yet, thank God. I think I was like, save that for my 40s. But, mom in my little Jeep. And he's like, we're racing each other. I wouldn't recommend you do this, by the way. I think it was what it was. And then eventually, like, we were just two human beings kind of drag racing each other on this, like, road. And then that was what was more important. And the bullshit fell away. Like, I wasn't a black person and he wasn't a cop. It was just two human beings playing. And then eventually he turned off. And I think, like, we looked at each other or something like that, and there was a nod, and then he went on his way. When you remove this mindset of reverence that we have for everything, right? So who's the president? No, you're just some dude in a suit. Oh, it's the Pope. No, you're just some dude in a dress. You know what I mean? You're wearing a costume. You're a human being, naked and afraid, with that voice in your head torturing you, just like it's torturing me. You have to deal with pain just like I have to deal with pain. You will suffer because existence is suffering. Existence is pain. But you will also feel pleasure. And you will also have happy moments because everything needs to balance out. When you remove that, it becomes sort of a different kind of game. You start deconstructing society's holds over your mind. You start breaking shit down. You start leaning into things. You start taking it apart. It does change you. And it does take you to a different level of the game. Thanks for listening.